Good day, everyone. Hopefully, everyone is having a beautiful day, whether it's morning, noon, or night when you are able to view this video. We at Charms MEDI-HELPZ Foundation would like to thank you for joining us in day 8 of our first annual Black Health History Month event, where it'll be 29 days with 29 different speakers who are coming to share their life and experiences as an African American slash Black healthcare consumer. Today is day 8, and on day 8, we are honored to have someone who I trust and who I know is such a delight and such a healthcare warrior and a healthcare survivor. Why do I know that? Because not only is she a friend, but she also sits on the board for the Chams MEDI-HELPZ Foundation because she gets it. And she knows that we face an uphill challenge and an uphill battle when it comes to finding the resources and the options, any information on where we can go to get access to the best, not better health outcomes, but the best health outcomes. And her name is Coach. We call her Coach, but her name is Patricia Pearson, but we call her Coach Pat. So I am going to tell you who Coach Pat is, and you'll see why she's such an important person to have on speaking on clinical trial participation from the participant side. What we're hoping is at the end of her, discussion, we're hoping one that all of the stakeholders that are involved in and with clinical trial participation, we're hoping that they see the need to actually get the voices, listen to the voices of the patients, especially those African American patients who are now currently in a clinical trial, who are thinking about becoming a clinical trial participant, or who have had success at being a clinical trial participant. We're hoping that you take the time to listen to these voices and perhaps collaborate together. Collaboration is key, especially if you want to get our voices. Collaborate together to bring those voices on board so that not only you can hear them, but so that others that might be interested in being a clinical trial participant will be able to hear from their own community what it's like to be a clinical trial participant, I should say. So, without further ado, I am going to go ahead and tell you who Coach Pat is. Coach Patricia Pearson is the CEO of her own certified business, Patricia Pearson LLC. She is a publishing coach and an author. She has been named the #1 bestseller on Amazon and featured on ABC, Fox, and CBS. Patricia mentors, coaches, and consults authors by teaching them how to create self-published and self-customized planners and journals for income and business growth. I'm going to stop right there for a second in reading that. And those of you who are listening who have been clinical trial participants, I'm hoping you take note of the fact and that you've written it down somewhere, the steps that you had to go through. What did you learn about the clinical trial phases? What did you learn about, being compensated for those? If you haven't, I'm encouraging you to listen. Write it down. Make it clearer so that those people who are, those patients who are thinking about, clinical trials and participating, that they'll have some place where they can go where, maybe once this video is over and they forget about the concept or they, forget about the importance of why they should be a clinical participant, they can go to the library, they can go to, any number of stores. They can go online and they can purchase your journal with the steps that you took in order to become a participant, as well as what you learned in being a participant in these trials. So just think about it. Hmm, maybe you should write a journal as well. Maybe you should write a planner. Maybe you should do something other than keeping all that information inside your head. Perhaps writing it down so that others can have an indication of what the path is like will be helpful. So back on to Coach Pat. She has an extensive finance, sales, and marketing background in the corporate arena. However, it is small business coaching that she is most passionate about. Her work educates, inspires, and motivates entrepreneurs. She has a proven system that gets more leads, allows for more freedom and leverage, and provides her clients with consistent guidance and high touch accountability. She has dedicated many years to the industry of entrepreneurship and empowerment. She enjoys sharing her success strategies with entrepreneurs to empower them to dream, plan, and achieve so that they can live out their passions. And without further ado, I am going to go ahead and turn the discussion over to Coach Pat so that she can tell you all that she's learned, or I should say, a huge part of what she's learned, because as she is still in the clinical trial, there's even more that she has to learn. But let's hear about what she's learned so far, and let's hear about, how it is that she has been able to progress through being a clinical trial participant, and why she thinks it's important as well to write it down and make it clear so that other patients can be helped by the knowledge that you all have from sharing already or becoming already a clinical trial participant. We in the African American community, we need you. Without you, we don't have, and won't have access to the medications that are better suited to treat us with the symptoms and the signs that we show up with. So please pay close attention to what Coach Pat says. And as I say always, if you need a copy of this video, if you like a copy, if you'd like to talk to Coach Pat, please at the end, go ahead and send me a message through LinkedIn, through Facebook. You can go on my website, which is www.MEDI-HELPZ. MEDI-HELPZ is spelled MEDIHELPZ. Send me an email and let me know, hey, Sandra, I would like to learn more about Coach Pat. I'd like to learn more about being a clinical trial participant. And at the end, after she's done speaking, I certainly hope that what she's saying today resonates with all of the stakeholders, meaning the patient, the patient's internal and external team, as well as the pharmacy industry. Take note of the importance of including the patient's voice in your trials. Sorry for that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Coach Pat.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Coach Pat Pearson, and I want to thank you, Sandra, for that very warm welcome. I am honored to be a board member of the MEDI-HELPZ Association, CHOMS MEDI-HELPZ Association. I am also honored to be on the stage with you today celebrating Black History Month. Today, we're going to be talking about my journal, my voice, exploring the benefits of participating in clinical trials and journaling. We only have a short amount of time, so I'm going to jump right in and get started. Again, welcome. I am Patricia Pearson. I help professionals turn their knowledge into multiple income streams by publishing a journal or planner as an individual stream of passive income. I am a certified business coach in addition to a publishing coach. But today I'm going to be talking to you on a personal level about clinical trials and journaling. Clinical trials, they are research studies that are intended to answer scientific questions to help understand whether a treatment is safe and effective for people with a particular disease or condition. It is a research study to determine if a treatment can improve a person's health. Journaling is the practice of regularly recording your thoughts, your feelings, and experiences in a journal, or what we used to call back in the day a diary. It is an activity that involves writing about a wide range of topics, including your emotions, different events that may occur, your goals, reflections, and even gratitude for things that happen along the way. There are many benefits to clinical trials. And today, the information that I'm sharing with you is based on my experience. I'm not a doctor. I'm sharing with you information based on my experience that I've actually gone through or I've studied prior to entering a clinical trial. Clinical trials help develop potential new medicines. This is how new medicines come about. They have to be tested prior to putting them on the market. They discover if certain medicines work better than others. They find new users for already approved medications. And they also give patients satisfaction in knowing their involvement may help others as they're going through these testings. Clinical trial participants are people who take part in clinical trials are usually volunteers. Often the participants are referred to by the healthcare provider, are referred by the healthcare provider. Self referral is also a way to become a clinical trial participant. Community outreach, research teams may engage specific communities to in an effort to inform the public of a specific clinical trial that's available. The results of every clinical trial, though, gives the researchers more information about the risk as well as the benefits of the trial. A clinical trial has four phases. Each phase has a different purpose and it helps the researcher to answer different questions. So, anytime you're either volunteering to be a part of a clinical trial or you're asked to be a part of a clinical trial, one of the questions you want to ask is, what phase is this trial in? Phase one, the objective assesses the safety and the tolerability of a drug or treatment. Participants are usually from a small group, anywhere from 20 to 100. The duration or the amount of time is usually several months. They focus determining safe dosage ranges, the method of delivery, how they're going to give it to you, whether it's going to be pill, liquid, or injection, and identifying the side effects. The outcome of the drug is deemed safe. If it's deemed safe, that's when it moves to the second phase, which is phase two. And the phase two objective of the drug is the efficiency of the drug and further assesses the safety. This is given to a much larger or a larger group of people, anywhere from 100 to 300. The duration is several months. It can go even as far as up to a couple of years in this phase. The focus is establishing preliminary data on whether the drug works in people who have a certain disease or condition. Outcome, if evidence of effect or benefit is observed, the trial progresses to phase three. If for some reason They do not go past, they do not achieve their outcome, they cannot move to the next phase. Phase three, confirm the drug's effectiveness, monitor side effects, and compare it to commonly used treatments. Participants from several hundreds to several thousands will be a part of this phase. The duration could go even as far as up to 4 years. The focus is gathering more information about safety and effectiveness, studying the different populations and different dosages using the drug in combination with other drugs. The outcome, the results of this phase are used to make a case for a regulatory approval. Once you get through phase three, then we move into phase four, which is actually conducted after the drug has been approved for public use to gather more information on the drug's effect in the various populations and to detect any side effects associated with the long term use. Participants, several thousand individuals are participating in this phase. The duration can be several years. The focus is detection and characterization of rare or long term adverse effects over a more extended period in a larger patient population. These findings can lead to a drug being marketed and often are used to refine or confirm the best treatment for particular conditions. Each phase of the clinical trial plays a critical role in the development of a new medication, interventions, and ensuring that they are safe and effective for the general population. A lot of people will say, that it's people are being guinea pigs or they're being tested. However, they're actually participating in finding out the results. With medications, you'll find that many times each person reacts differently. I am a chemo patient, and each person in that room when we're going through chemo will have different side effects. It can be the same medication, but different side effects, and that's why they have to go through these phases so they can determine the different side effects that may be caused by males, females, Caucasians, African Americans, different individuals. Preparation to be a part of a clinical trial is extensive. It's not just something you just walk up and say, I want to be a part of a clinical trial, and they put you in the trial. You have to go through testing. You should also, first of all, yourself do research and and consult with other patients, consult with doctors to find out, any information that you can about this trial. Eligibility. Patients need to undergo eligibility screening to determine if they meet specific criteria for participating in a clinical trial. My doctor had suggested that I be a part of a clinical trial I believe it was last year, and we went through the testing and everything, and found out that I was not eligible. My heart ejection rate factor had to be at a certain number, and the ejection rate factor was off by 5, so I could not participate in the clinical trial. So they go through eligibility testing. They don't just put people in these tests. They also get your medical history and your records. They find out the eligibility, check your medical tests and evaluations, um, get informed consent. Whenever you're participating in something like this, you want to get as much information as possible before participating in a clinical trial. Participants will be asked to review and sign informed consent forms. The form outlines the details of the trial, including its purpose, as well as the benefits and the patient's rights and responsibilities as being a part of the trial. Um, Again, like I mentioned, your medical history, your medical records. When you're a part of a clinical trial, they test everything. If there's anything wrong with you, they're going to find it because they put you through all of the many different tests, testing your blood, testing your urine, testing your sugar. They test, they put you through a gamut because they have to know if this, for instance, if you have sugar, how does a patient with sugar react to this particular drug? So they have to get all of the information as much as possible. Commitment and compliance. Even though you sign up for a clinical trial, if for some reason you decide you no longer want to participate, you can bow out of the clinical trial. And when you bow out of the clinical trial, they don't just drop you. Your doctor, your oncologist, or whomever is working with you will continue other treatments to, first of all, I think they have like a, depending on the trial, there may be like a 30-day period where they're still watching you once you've decided to leave the trial. But your doctor will move on to other treatments so that you will continue to get the support that is necessary for you to move forward in your illness and yes, in your illness. Then there's support system. It can be helpful for patients to have strong support systems. Your family, your friends, your relatives, even other medical practitioners, medical advocates. They are all very helpful in helping you to move forward in your participation in any clinical trial. Um, in 2020, I was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. After being diagnosed, of course, you go through the, oh, I have cancer, blah, blah, blah. But I went through, when they first notified me that I had cancer, I was like, okay, so what do we do? So my doctor's like, okay, we can't do surgery because it's the tumor is too large and it's too close to your heart. So we started out with chemotherapy. I had rounds and rounds and rounds of chemotherapy as well as radiation. During the chemotherapy and the radiation, the tumor did shrink. However, it didn't go away. After having the rounds of radiation and chemotherapy, they put me on another medication, which is a chemo medication, and that began to affect with my organs, my liver and my kidney. So we had to stop that treatment. In the midst of that, though, I was offered to be in a clinical trial. That particular clinical trial I didn't get because you had to have a certain um, heart ejection rate factor. And at that time, I was 5 points off, so they couldn't accept me in the clinical trial. Now, they had done all of the tests. I had had MRIs, I had had blood tests, I had everything, EKG, of course, until they got that echocardiogram to determine that I was 5 points off. So they had to scratch it. So after going into another treatment of chemotherapy, my doctor referred me to another clinical trial, which is the clinical trial I'm on now. The clinical trial is phase 1. And with this trial, in the beginning, after he referred me, of course, I did my research. I met with the doctor, one of the clinical doctors. They went over everything in complete detail as to the side effects, um, what the possibilities are, etc. They didn't leave any details out. I had the option, and I still have the option today to say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I had the option to say no or yes. So they gave me thorough information, and based on the information they gave me, I decided to go forth with the clinical trial. Now, the thing with going through the clinical trial is, like I said, the commitments. There are a lot of doctor's appointments, a lot more for me anyway, appointments, but each trial is different. Just because one trial you have to have, just like the first trial, my heart ejection rate factor had to be at a certain number. In this trial, it did not. So different trials have different requirements. So just because you're refused from one does not necessarily mean that you'll be refused from another one. And the one thing that I can definitely tell you is being a part of a clinical trial, they test everything. Data collection is the key. Accurate data collection is crucial in clinical trials because it facilitates the analysis and the interpretation of the results and ultimately informs the approval of new treatments by regulatory agencies. You get regular, today I get regular CT scans, MRI scans, bone scans, blood samples, EKGs, and eye examinations. Now, I get the eye examinations because one of the side effects of the trial that I'm in affects my eyes. It gives me something, it looks like pink eye, but it's really not pink eye. So not only am I seeing my the clinical trial doctors on a regular basis, I'm seeing an eye doctor on a regular basis based on the clinical trial. After each treatment, I have to see the doctor within 10 days. Before the treatment, I have to see the eye doctor within 10 days so that they can monitor to see the progress of how my eyes are doing. Fortunately, I'm blessed and I thank God. I have not experienced a lot of side effects with this clinical trial, the major one being my eyes. And of course, I have I guess, a congestion problem. That's why you'll see me wiping my nose occasionally, a little congestion. But those are the major things that I'm going through right now. Now, I've been through some of the other treatments where I felt much worse. But this trial has been really a breeze. And again, they're all different. None of them, no two trials are the same. Even as far as qualifying for them, no two trial is going to be the same. Now, going through this trial, that's how I came across journaling. Because as you're going through, you need to, well, they're keeping track of everything, but it's to your benefit to do the same. Journaling not only helps with the trial, it helps you communicate your experiences, your side effects as you're going through the trial, your prescriptions, which is one of the documents I use, as I mentioned earlier. This journal, I can actually write down all of my different doctor's visits. And if you want one of these, shameless plug, contact Sandra Washington. She is the author of this journal. Your medications, you need this because what happens is when I go to my eye doctor, he says to me, "So, what medications are you on?" So you need to know what medications you're on, what milligrams, and how often you're taking them. When as a lung cancer patient, I have to see my lung doctor. When I go to her, she wants to know what medications my oncologist has me on because they have to work together so that they don't give you the wrong medication that's gonna either counteract or do something different that's gonna affect what they're trying to accomplish. So keeping track of your medication, keeping track of your doctor's visits, because a lot of times, especially me, I'm getting up there with the age. My eye doctor will say, "So when was your last treatment?" Um, I don't remember. I have to pull out my journal so I can give them the date of when I had my last treatment. So these journaling definitely helps Recording your thoughts and feelings during the clinical trial can be very, very helpful. It improves your self awareness. It helps you to better understand your body and what's going on with your body. Better communication with your doctors, because now you have a record of what happened last week. You don't necessarily have to remember because you have a record. When you, after your treatment, you had a serious headache, you had a very bad headache, or you had a stomach ache, whatever, you have it written down so you don't have to try to remember that. It gives you some insight into your treatment, and it actually makes you feel a part of the process of putting it all together. So that's why I say journaling through the process. Not only, it's also a record keeping for you. Communication, the act of writing, is the act of discovering what you believe. I say the act of writing is the act of discovering what you believe and feel. This is a quote by David Hare. This is why we should write things down. Now, racial diversity. Is racial diversity important in clinical trials? The answer is absolutely yes. Race, ethnicity, age, and sex can all impact how different people respond to the same medication or vaccine. This is why diversity among clinical trial participants is so important. One of the participants in the trial that I'm in was a male Caucasian. He and I encountered some of the same side effects. However, his side effects were worse than mine. So naturally, now they have to take into consideration the fact that he was Caucasian and male, and I'm female and African American. So now they're gonna have to take a look at that when it comes to testing other people as well to see if this is a factor. Because when I understand, his was but so much more serious that he actually had to leave the trial. And that is one thing that one of the main questions that I asked when I started the trial was, if I decide to leave the trial, you know, what about my treatment? You continue to get your regular treatment. If you decide to leave the clinical trial, you will still continue to get your regular medical treatment that you were getting prior to becoming a part of the trial. Some of the clinical myths that we as African Americans have about clinical trials: safety and side effects. Of course, um, a lot of us believe that, we're just being used, and I have it down here also, as guinea pigs to test whether these medicines are working or not. And I'm here to tell you that that is not true. I personally, I've I if I had a cold or anything, it's going to be detected. You're going to get, to me, better treatment by being in a clinical trial because they're looking at everything. They're testing your blood, they're testing your sugar, they're testing everything. So if there's anything there, they're going to find it. So you don't have to necessarily worry about, yeah, the side effects. With everything comes side effects. They're going to notify you ahead of time what the possible side effects are. If you encounter a different side effect, they're going to investigate what that side effect is. So your safety is very much put up front when it comes to clinical trials. Discrimination, or they're just using the African Americans, just to test this stuff to see if it's going to work. No, that is not true. Unfortunately, because there's not enough African Americans participating, we get generalized treatment. The generalized, because they have not had enough of us to test so that they can focus specifically on the African American male, female. Of course, the benefit of mistrust. Um, being ineligible. People think that they're ineligible if they don't have insurance, or they're ineligible because they're a certain age. That's also not true. Again, there's guidelines for clinical trials. However, there is no guidelines with regards to age and whether you have insurance or not, and access to care. The care is, like I said, is always there for you, whether you're in the trial, even when you decide to leave the trial, the care is still there for you to monitor you until you get through the process, through the end of the trial. They don't just stop, drop you, and then that's it. In conclusion, what I'd like to share is that clinical trials and journaling is a very, very powerful combination for both mental health outcomes. Clinical trials are critical for advancing medical knowledge and improving patient care, and journaling is vital component of these trials by capturing the personal experiences. These instances are very important in shaping healthcare decision making, promoting patient centered care, and enhancing the overall quality of the healthcare system. Me, as I said, as a person that's going through a clinical trial, I am always available to answer any questions that anyone may have regarding the clinical trial. I wholeheartedly support them and agree with them. But like you and everyone else, I do my research first. So, again, my name is Coach Pat Pearson. If you'd like to ask me more questions about clinical trials, or if you'd like to get your customized planner or journal created with your name and your logo, you can also reach me at coachpatfreesession.com, and I'll be happy to discuss it with you. At this time, I'm going to turn it back over to Miss Sandra. Sandra, you're up.
Okay, I have some questions in reference to what you want, what you've gone through. And one of those questions is, what made you decide to become a clinical trial participant?
Actually, my doctor. I didn't really know much about clinical trials. Um, so when he offered um, me to participate in a clinical trial, I was like, of course, I was skeptical, and I had to go and ask some questions, and I decided, to move forward. I mean, it's still, you're still being treated, and I too was also impressed by the idea of being able to help someone else along the way.
And that's true. And that's exactly what a clinical trial participant is able to do. And that's why it's so important for us to actually take part in clinical trials, right? So we can get the right medicine, so we can make sure that the right medicine is available for us. And without going through those clinical trials, very often we can't do that. Like there's no way for us to do it. We got to take whatever they give us,
Hmm.
right? We
Yep.
become guinea pigs at that point in time. So it's going to kind of like, well, discrimination, you want to be discriminated against because you want to make sure you get the best health outcomes. And
Right.
so they say that that's a matter of, well, they discriminate. And, you got to look at it from both ends. And so I appreciate the fact that you came in, and I know it was early on, while you was making the decision that we had a room on clinical trials here on here on LinkedIn. I'm like I say Clubhouse. We had a room here on LinkedIn, which actually you were actually able to learn even more information. And you
Yes.
were able to learn that more information by two African Americans who actually, one owns the clinical trial firm and the other one does clinical trial research. And you were able to get some of that information answered.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay,
Absolutely.
well, if they say I could do it, then I could do it. But now I know what now I know the doctor's telling me the truth, right?
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Now I know that the doctor is telling the truth when he tells me what I have access to, what I don't have access to, what they're supposed to cover and what they're not supposed to cover. because there are many clinical trials out here, and some say, oh, well, you need to be paying your own transportation, you need to do this, you need to do that. Those are all myths that a lot of people hear, and they don't do the right research. So those questions never get answered. The participants, the research firms, and the other clinical trials that are being run out here, I'm sure that they bring some information in, some patients in to ask them questions, but it needs to happen on more frequent basis. It
Mm.
needs to be out where other patients who are not clinical trial participants can look at it and see it and say, okay, well, they're talking about it and I'm interested and I'm really interested. But if patients don't see it, and it's not on TikTok, it's not on LinkedIn or Clubhouse or Facebook or Instagram, any other platforms where we're not talking, especially where African Americans are prominent at, and you're not talking about it, not just you talking about it, but actually participants that have actually taken part in it. If they're not talking about it, how can you get help?
Right, absolutely. You mentioned about payment. Now, the particular clinical trial that I'm on, they actually pay for all of my medical expenses. Different trials are different. The first trial that I was going to be a part of, I think they gave you like a little stipend of $100 or something a visit, but they paid for whatever your insurance did not pay. So those are different areas also that you want to ask when you're participating in a trial, because some of them they vary depending on the trial.
And that's why it's important to for patients to know, for us to hear more about what's offered, like for us to say, okay, well, this, there's different ones. Some offer this, some offer this, but for sure you shouldn't be paying for things that you shouldn't be paying for, because none of us want to give away money where we think we're not sure, and well, this might work, this might not work. But it removes a lot of the fear from patients that are engaged and want that experience of being in a clinical trial, but they're just not sure how to do it, and they need to hear from other participants. It brings out what they might be holding inside. What
Hmm.
might make the difference between a yes or a no is if you get other participants together and actually have them talk. So it's sort of like a round table,
Hmm. Yes.
right? You have a round table, people hear, people know, people, a lot of times now since COVID, a lot of things have been done online. But if you get that experience together and it is Zoom, you still see the person.
Hmm.
You still can reach out and virtually touch the person and bring whatever questions you have and ask the questions. If the patients that are sitting in the round circle, the ones that are going through the patient trials, they don't know, they can always ask,
Hmm.
right? And they can always bring it back and say, hey, this is the answer to your questions. But
Right.
we got to get to a point where we feel comfortable being able to be in trials. We feel comfortable being able to do the things that we need to do to guarantee not only our life, but to guarantee the life of those that are coming behind us. You bring up a really interesting point as well when you talk about the journals. As I was saying when I asked you to come and speak to us in reference to what is it like for someone that actually participates in a clinical trial? Like, take all the big words, the fancy words, everything else out of the picture. As far as a patient, what does it look like? And you told us what it looks like, right? There are other people that have other health disease conditions.
Hmm.
They need to write it down.
Hmm.
Writing it down, you could put it in an ebook, you could put it anywhere. But there are other patients that are out in the world that are going through the same conditions that you are. You have a journal, you put it in a journal, you keep track of it, you put it out. If you want to make additional money, you put it in the market, you bring it so other people can buy it. Even if you have to leave it for your family, at least they have, okay, well, if something happens, this is what she went through or he went through, or this is some of the things that I can expect. So, every one of us that are patients, we have a story to tell.
Yeah.
We should tell that story
Yep.
because in telling that story, especially in the African American community, and telling that story, it helps so many other people who
Hmm.
don't know, who, when they hear a diagnosis, they automatically get scared,
Right.
right? They automatically, their fear factor steps in, and they get scared of what it is that they've heard or they think. Or unfortunately, especially in our community, people have a tendency to go to Dr. Google, which Dr. Google is cool. Like, I love Dr. Google myself. But I know what I'm reading. And I know that if I'm reading something that doesn't seem right or doesn't, really touch the surface, they'll continue to dig. But some people read it, go on there and they pull information off, and that's not what happens. Automatically, the flags go up. Automatically, it's like, oh my God, the worst of the worst is going to happen to me. And so many times, that's just not what happens. It's just not, where that goes. Is everything is going to go terribly wrong, right? It's just not going to happen like that. So I thank you for that, and I'm certainly hoping that as people are listening, not to make a sale or to sell you into something, but I'm certainly hoping that if you're suffering from a health condition, especially in our African American community, and I bring it up because of another reason, we have rare conditions in our community
Hmm.
that we don't know about. We don't know about it because nobody's talking. I lost my oldest sister about maybe 15 years ago. She had a really rare condition. And then talking to my mom at the time when we found out what was wrong, my mother goes to me, well, I don't know where she got that from, like whose side of the family she received that from, because nobody in the family had that. And I asked her, Ma, how you know? Because y'all wasn't even talking, like you wasn't talking, you wasn't discussing this stuff. If you had have written it down, we would have been able to have a recourse or somewhere we could go and look it up and say, oh, but Aunt Susie or Uncle Mike or someone else had this. But they didn't have the same tools that we have in order to be able to keep track of things that go on. They didn't have the same tools. The internet was, I mean, it wasn't even thought about, right? FaceTime wasn't even thought about. So they didn't have those access to the same tools we have. We now have access to so many tools to help us write it down and make it clear. Write it down and say, well, this happened, that happened, or other happened when I was diagnosed with cancer, or I was diagnosed with leukemia, or whatever else you were diagnosed with. Because if it's something rare that we really don't focus on in the African American community, it'll cause us to stop and think. Wow. I mean, imagine walking in a bookstore, or right now my book is in a virtual, it's in the metaverse. So imagine visiting the metaverse in a year or 6 months, 2 months, whatever, and you see somebody that's had leukemia. Leukemia isn't really a known African American health condition. But you see that, and you see the person on that book looks like you. You're going to stop and say, let me pick up that book and see what happened. Maybe it's something that I could do, or I should be doing, or I should be knowing about. What are the symptoms? What are the signs? Putting all of that stuff down into whether it's a book, whether it's a journal, but getting it written down into something and making it available for your community to have and to share, it makes a big difference, because then we feel like we're not going through this alone,
Right.
right? We feel like we got help. We have help that we didn't have before. We have a little bit more knowledge than we had the day before. So with that being said, and I do want to say thank you, Angelica, and you saw. I'm hoping that I said that right. For coming into today's room, and I do have a question from Sherry. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring her to stage and let her ask her question. Go ahead, Sherry.
Thank you, Sandra. My name is Sheree. I answer questions. Um, and I realize there's a history with the Black community the Black community in this country and the skepticism behind trusting clinical trials. And I was listening to you, Ms. Pat, when you spoke on, not really having a whole lot of history of clinical trials. The history of the clinical trials in this country has basically painted a picture for our community not to trust those in charge of clinical trials and what they're being used for, and or what they're basically giving us. And I know there's been some changes over the years. What do you all suggest for our community to get over the skepticism? I lost my mother in 2013 to stage 4 lung cancer. She was diagnosed, and 2 months later, she was gone. So it's one of those areas of, it's a touchy area for me, for many different reasons. And skepticism is one of not trusting those who are in charge of supposedly being caretakers. And the second question I wanted to ask is how do you feel like being a part of the clinical trial has helped you or has improved your life after being diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Your first question, how do we, and I think Sandra may be able to touch on this a little bit later, how do we have to somehow get the message out that it is not what it used to be when it comes to clinical trials? I think by me sharing my story and getting other people to share their stories about clinical trials, I think that may help in some way. And I'm going to leave the rest of that to possibly to Sandra to touch base on. The second part, with regards to whether I feel the clinical trial has helped me, I'm going to have to say, thank God, yes. And the reason I say that is because prior to being on the clinical trial, as you know, the chemotherapy, any type of medications, there's side effects. Well, last year, one of the chemo treatments that I was on, I was so out of it. I mean, I could barely walk from the front of my house to the back of my house because I had no energy. The side effects from that particular drug really, really took me out. So naturally, that's why I say with this drug, this trial, yeah, I feel I have a much better quality of life.
Thank you for responding and answering that. I appreciate you.
Oh, you're welcome. Sandra, you want to touch on that?
Yes, and once again, what it's going to take for us to do in reference to getting the African American community more aligned and more attuned with what's going on in our community is we got to move from behind closed doors. We have to start, whether it's the barber shop, the beauty shop, the church, community center, we got to start asking patients, can you please come out and talk about what occurred with you? Even once again, if it's even if it's we just have like a round table. I lost my sister to one of my other sisters passed away to both breast cancer and ovarian cancer. We didn't have these kind of talks then. The good thing about COVID, when she came and set up shop and brought a family in, is it highlighted what we need it to happen in all communities, but especially the African American community. Well, now as COVID's not going anywhere, it's a pandemic. It's going to be here with us forever. But what's happening now is that some of that limelight is trying to be distracted away from our community and put towards other things, or it's made it to seem like, okay, well, there's no diversity. Diversity is just a made up word, and we're not being included in those conversations. Well, guess what's going to happen if we really don't start becoming involved in those conversations? It's going to happen. It's going to do just like everything else has done with healthcare, and they're going to take the money or take the research and they're going to put it on something else when we're not involved in it. So what it's going to take is for us all to come from, and when I say all, I mean the clinicians. I am not a clinician, but I am a healthcare professional. Come from behind the closed doors of having those conversations and actually begin to have them out in the open. Um, Starting a podcast talking about clinical trials so patients could participate. And there may already be a clinical trial podcast, but if we don't know about it, how are we going to talk about it? If we don't know about it, how are we going to share that resource? I'm pretty sure there probably is someone that's actually already doing one. But once again, if our community doesn't know about it, how can we participate in it? And then we have to ask the question, well, was it even brought up for us? I mean, are we even meant to be in that particular podcast? And if the answer is no, then we have to start our own podcasting and talking about things talking about things of our own. And as we talk about them, what's going to happen is that those in our community that are patients or have a loved one that's suffering through something is going to come forth and they're going to start talking about it. And then that's how the communication grows, because every day this week that we've done the Black Health History program from February 1st, today is February 8th, we've all heard the same thing. Those who have looked at the videos after they have been downplayed or went on my website and actually watched the videos, they've all heard the same common theme: communication. Communication is key. And you cannot have communication that you want everyone to know about behind closed doors. It's just not going to happen. It's really not going to happen. So it's going to take us all coming together at that table and saying, this is what we need to do in order to get it done. And then, as I say all the time when people ask me, stop talking about it and make it happen. Stop talking about it. Stop talking about what we need to do, what we should do, what we could do, and make it happen. Only when we make it happen is it going to make a difference. Only when we push it out there and push it forth is it going to make a difference. We could talk forever and ever about the same thing. It's going to get us right where we are now. Right, sitting right here where we are right now without any changes done. So here tonight, Coach Pat has come on. She shared with us the facts and data around clinical trials, but she also brought her own patient experience to the table. She also shared with us what she went through and what she's currently going through as a clinical trial participant. Why? Because she cares. Why? Because she wants to see other people get the same benefits that she has gotten and be prepared and get into the same thing that she's gotten into. That's what she's asked for. That's what she wants. And how else can you do it but to become involved? I'm hoping that answered your question. No, and you know what, Sharon, you're so right. What I was hoping that would happen was with Coach Pat coming on to tell her clinical participation piece was that we would have someone that was either clinical trial researcher or a clinical trial, running a clinical trial, anything in the clinical trial area from the clinician side, come today to actually help to share the information that we all need to know in the African American community, that we all need to know in order for us to be more educated when it comes down to why should we participate in clinical trials? Why should we, what's the difference between clinical trial participation and being a holistic care provider or being a holistic patient? I'm a holistic patient. I see both an acupuncturist and a functional medicine doctor for my medical care, as well as my regular doctors. But I truly believe that the holistic part has made a difference in my life. But I would love to know from a clinician, and today is not going to happen, but I would love to know from a clinician's point of view, how would it help? Like, how does holistic care tie into clinical trial? Are there clinical trials available for those who follow the holistic movement? Are they there? So I can understand you saying, okay, I still have some hesitation. I still have some thought process behind it, which is why when we host things like this, we need the clinicians and the patients to be in the same room, and the caregivers, or even participate. We need all the stakeholders who might even be considering, well, if I need to do a clinical trial, should I do one? Have the answers proactively. That's what we needed to happen today. This was a good time for those clinicians who keep promoting and who keep saying we need African American participation. This was a good day for them to get on, to come on, hear what Coach Pat had to say, hear what she experienced through her patient experience, and then give us their side of, here's some of the questions that you might have, and here's some of the answers that you might have. Hopefully, in the near future, we will be able to get a clinician, the clinical team, the patient team together, so that we'll have those questions that you still have in the back of your mind, right? They can come to the forefront and they could be addressed. That's why I said we have to have that communication. Without it, we're dead. I mean, we really are dead when it comes down to that. Thinking we need to make sure that we have all patients at the table. And since this is Black History Month, as I call it, Black Health History Month, it's more important that we hear from the Black patients what it is, the African American patients, what it is that they need to hear or that they need to know to help them say, okay, well, I'm interested, sign me up. We talking, it makes a difference because someone will hear it and say something, but we need to actually make a difference. We need to come together. Us getting African Americans involved in clinical trials is an all hands on deck approach from the clinical side as well as the patient side, as well as any other stakeholder that may be involved in clinical trial participation. That's what it's going to take. So I hope I answered it just a little bit more than, before. But of course, you're going to, and you know what? You should. Every last Black patient or caregiver or stakeholder in the healthcare system here and abroad, what we should always have is something on our mind when it comes down to any health disease condition. We need to be able to think and act in a very, very good way to bring about the best health outcomes ever when it comes down to us engaging in that healthcare journey. Without it, I mean, I could tell you, doctor could tell you, clinician could tell you, but at the end of the day, you need to take all that professional information, mesh it together, and see what works and what doesn't work for you. And that's how you should be. That's how you should be moving forward. Is that good, Sherry? All right. Thank you. All right, Coach Pat. What I do want to say to you tonight is thank you so much for coming. Thank you for being a part of the Chom's MEDI-HELPZ Foundation. We so appreciate you. The patients that have you serving on the board, who are diagnosed with cancer. or diagnosed with any other disease that happens to go along with cancer. As I was talking to someone today, and I was saying, what's with cancer is that so often when you're diagnosed with cancer, you also hear about an underlying condition that you have that you didn't know you had. And you find out about those underlying conditions because they're running a gamut of tests from A to Z to you for you in their clinical trial. So they'll come back and tell you, did you know you had? No, I didn't know. And without being a clinical trial participant, you would never know that you had it, because when you go to the doctor, most of the time, they're taking the routine test. They're not doing any additional digging, any additional searching. So being a clinical trial participant, you learn about those other healthcare conditions that you have that go along with cancer, or more commonly found in patients that have cancer. That's when you need to start writing stuff down, because you need to keep a record of, okay, well, nobody told me this before. Now you're telling me this. I need to make sure my family knows about this, because it's very easily that someone in your family could be coming up with those same conditions, right? So what I'm going to ask you before we close out for the evening, I don't see where we have any additional questions. What I am going to ask you before we close this out is that you put on that precious smile of yours and close us out with some precious words, whether it's scripture, whether it's a quote that you hold dear to your heart, whether it's an affirmation. Just, say something nice to close us out. Right. And so that would be CHLMS, and then MEDI-HELPZ is spelled MEDIHELPZ, not with the S. Somebody stole that from us before we paid for it, so we had to change it. But I'm kind of glad we did change it. So once again, that's CHLMS, MEDI-HELPZ, MEDIHELPZ.com, or foundation.com. You can go there and you can see, get in touch with us if you need help. If you like to talk to Coach Pat even more and you can't remember her name, you can send me a message through LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Say, hey, Sandra, I need to know more. I'm interested, but I'm still kind of skeptical, and I really don't believe what I'm hearing when the clinicians get on. So can you give me, can I get in touch with her to ask her some more personal questions to see if this is for me? Please, by all means, go ahead and reach out to me to let me know. Thank you. And everyone, please stay tuned for tomorrow, day 9, where we will be talking about STEM, mental health. We will be talking about a few things that everybody should be interested in. So please stay tuned and join in with us. We'll see you on day 9.